Hey, what's up, everyone? All right, so I've got an interview for you guys that's really cool. I've been following this guy for a long time online. I think we've got a lot in common as far as the books that we read and just productivity, mindset, mental toughness, that kind of thing. So I was really excited when I got an email from James Clear talking about his new book and the opportunity to possibly do some interviews and talk about that and chat. So thanks for joining me, James.
Yeah, you bet. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I've been following you for quite some time. It seems like just the other day I was googling something about motivation, and your one of your articles came up, and it was really good. So it's kind of cool to have you on the channel and to be able to pick your brain about some of the some of the questions that I have for you. But maybe for those in my audience that aren't familiar with you, maybe if you want to give yourself like kind of a quick intro of who you are and what you do.
Sure. So my name's James Clear. I write at jamesclear.com. Most of the articles that I've been writing there for the last 5 or 6 years have been about topics like habits and decision making, motivation, peak performance, and just sort of the entire process associated with continuous improvement and what it means to get better and to live better. And most recently, I wrote a book called Atomic Habits, which is published by Penguin Random House this fall. And it's sort of kind of my framework and overarching philosophy of how habits work, how to build better habits, and why they're important, like why they compound over time. And this is, part of the core philosophy of my work is a few things. So one, that small changes, they're very easy to dismiss on a daily basis, but they compound over time. And two, that we do not rise to the level of our goals, but we fall to the level of our systems. And
Right.
so I'm very focused on how to build better systems, whether that be a system for working out in the gym or a system for writing and producing or creating work, a system for meditating and reducing stress, a system for eating healthy, and getting more done and being more productive. It doesn't matter really where you focus, but the results that you have right now in your life, whatever your current system is, it's perfectly designed to deliver your current results. And so if you want different results, you need to design a different process or a different system. And those two overarching philosophies, that small habits compound over time, and the way to get better habits is to build a better system, are sort of like central tenets of the writing and work that I do.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that thinking. That I remember. I'm trying to think where one of the places where I heard that as well was that book, how to lose at everything and still win big.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Scott Adams has his like goals are for losers thing or whatever, where he like is
yeah,
very focused on the system and the process over the goal.
Yeah, and that's always been my thing too. I found that I've had the most success with that, just having like I have systems of everything from I fast until 5 o'clock every day, and so that's my system.
Sure.
Like that's I don't have to make decisions, and it's like when I was writing blog posts, it was like every Monday it has to go out, and when I was writing my book, like every chapter, every single day, a new chapter had to be written, and those things are the things that with my workouts and everything. I'm gonna go run after this. It's all like systems. Otherwise, I would not have the willpower or ability to like do the stuff that I do.
Yeah, I was a very goal-oriented person for a long time.
Mhm.
I think that's kind of like my default mode. So I would set goals for the grades I wanted in school, or the weights I wanted to lift in the gym, or how much money I wanted to make in my business. And eventually, I came to this realization that like, oh, some of these things I've accomplished, but a lot of them I failed on. But I had a goal for all of them. So clearly, having the goal couldn't be the thing that led to success.
Right.
Like in many areas, winners and losers have the same goals. Every Olympian wants to win a gold medal.
Right.
Every author wants to write a best-selling book. Like every candidate who applies for the job wants to get it. So they all have the same goal. So what's the thing that actually determines the difference in the performance? And it's the process and the system. And that doesn't mean goals are like totally useless. I think they're good for setting direction or figuring out like where do you want to focus. But as soon as you've done that, you pretty much need to put the goal on the shelf and just focus on the daily process and the system associated with it.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's kind of funny because I mean, most of the time too, what I came to realize the same thing is like I'll set a goal, but I don't have any direct control over the goal. I only have indirect control. Like if you say I want to
Mhm.
make $1 million this year, you can control the processes and systems that you do, but you can't ultimately control that. Same thing like losing
Yeah, you
weight.
can't make people buy it, right? Like
Exactly.
you can only make it. You can only do the interview. You can't make people listen to it. You can only, like build the product. You can't force people to take their credit card out. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think it helps shift the focus to what you can control.
Yeah, yeah. So like for my YouTube channel, like I've got, I had a goal of getting 100,000 subscribers, but what I ended up doing was I made a system of making 2 videos a day, and that was
Yep.
like it's like I can't control that, but eventually I'll probably hit this goal. I always have this trust the process. It's like I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
focus on the
There, yeah, dude,
good
you're wearing it.
process. Yeah, and that's the thing we can control. So that's really cool. So I think a lot more people need to hear that message. And I think a core to it, probably why you wrote the book is that the habit. So tell me more about this kind of idea of like how habits play into this.
So one of the reasons I chose the phrase atomic habits for the title of the book, like, the word atomic kind of has multiple meanings. So one meaning is tiny or small. So, and I do believe that we should be focused on making small changes each day rather than getting wrapped up in like whatever this earth shattering change would be or this transformation that you're hoping for. But another meaning of the word atomic is the smallest fundamental unit of a larger system. So,
Mm,
like atoms build into molecules, molecules build into compounds, and so on. So, there's sort of this like cumulative building effect. And that same thing is true for building better habits and creating a better system. So, like if people want to get in shape, for example, a lot of the time they'll do something like build one new habit, like, okay, I'm going to drink 8 glasses of water a day, or I'm going to go for, I'm going to walk 10,000 steps or something like that. And they'll stick to that one habit for a week or a month or whatever it is, but then they don't see any like measurable change in their body or how they look in the mirror or whatever, and they get upset or get depressed and decide to give up. But it's not a single 1% change that is going to be transformative. It's like 1,000 of them. And so
mhm.
the same way that atoms build into molecules and bigger compounds, habits are sort of like the atoms of our life. They're like the fundamental behaviors and rituals that we do each day. And what you need is to collect a bunch of them to put them together like atoms in a molecule that are all organized towards the same outcome. So you're making 10 or 15 small 1% changes related to your health, not just one thing like walking for 10,000 steps. And
Right.
as you accumulate those, then you start to see the results over time. That's how tiny changes compound into remarkable results, is when they add up like that. And so the way that I think about habits and systems working together is that your system is made up of a collection of habits. And
Mhm.
so you're just looking to build a variety of 1% improvements and small habits that are all organized towards the same fundamental goal.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's it, and that's I think that's really important because it's funny. I do a little bit of running, and I think a lot of people think when they train for a marathon, people usually gain weight. They don't actually lose weight. They think, oh, I'm going to run all these miles, and it's because of exactly what you said. It's like even if you're just run, like it's not enough. Like it's got to be like you got to also do the diet. Like if you wanted to lose weight, like there's all those little things that add up. But the one thing, like if you just change your activity level, then you eat more, have those multiple habits, which makes sense. I think that a lot of people just focus on the one thing, like you said, and then they don't see that. And even the same thing, I think, as an entrepreneur, like with funnels and like it's
Mhm.
like you make these 1%. I think I was trying to think. Probably, I think maybe the best book I read on was like Perry Marshall's 80/20 marketing, sales and marketing. And he's like, okay, well, if you make a tweak here, you get like a few percent conversion here and a few percent more leads here, then bam, this whole effect ends up being an exponential improvement.
Right. Yeah. It's really when you combine all the 1% changes together that you get something really powerful. But the great news is you don't have to overwhelm yourself. You don't
Hmm.
need to focus on like doing everything at once. You just are focused on, let me find some way today. Can I get 1% better every day? Can I find something to tweak or optimize or do a little bit better on? And then, as you keep looking for those areas of improvement, they end up accumulating over the long run. But it doesn't need to be like, and this is the systems over goals philosophy as well. You don't need to come up with like some incredible earth shattering goal and focus on that and bite off,
Right.
like most people are like, most people are focused on achieving some result that is very impressive, rather than building a system that's unsexy but that just works. So like, I had a reader who he ended up losing over 100 pounds, and one of the ways that he did it was, in the beginning he went to the gym, but he wasn't allowed to stay at the gym for more than 5 minutes. And
Interesting.
that sounds really funny to people because it's the complete opposite of how most people try to get in shape, right? Like
Yeah.
most people are sitting around, they feel bad about the fact they're out of shape. So then they're like, all right, I'm going to do Insanity or P90X or join a CrossFit gym or do something like really intense. And they do that for 2 weeks or a month or something. And then they burn out or they get injured or whatever. And then they don't do anything for a few months until they get motivated again. And then like the cycle repeats itself. But he went to the gym for 5 minutes and then he just, would do like one exercise or something. And then when it got to be 5 minutes, he was like, all right, I got to go. So he did this for like 6 weeks. And what people fail to realize is that a habit must be established before it can be improved. So often we're focusing on what the outcome, we're optimizing for the finish line, but he optimized for the starting line. So try to figure out like, how can I make it as easy as possible to get started each day? And then after he was coming there for like 6 weeks, he'd already mastered the habit of showing up, right? Like he had built that habit of being there. Well, then you have all sorts of options, because once you're the type of person who shows up, then you're like, well, what kind of exercise should I be doing? Or should I stay for 15 minutes instead of 5? Or, like I'm coming here every day, I might as well do something different. And there's all these little logistical things associated with a new habit that we don't really think about at first. Like, all right, I want to work out. Okay, well, what gym will you go to? What route will you take to get there? Are you going to work out on your own or with somebody else? Do you have to have your gym clothes ready before you go to work, or what time of day will you work out? Like all of that stuff. And when you just focus on the first 2 minutes or 5 minutes, you figure all that out and then you master the art of showing up, and then you have the chance to improve from there. But so often people like jump over that whole starting point and just try to do something really impressive. And that's not how you can't build a good system that way. There's a great quote by John Gall, who's this like systems scientist. And he said something to the effect of, every working system is composed of a smaller working subsystem. You can't just build a big complex system from scratch. You always have to like pare it down and build a smaller working subsystem and then layer on top of that. And so many people try to build something impressive from scratch rather than just focusing on the first 2 minutes, mastering that, and then expanding from there.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's like this, these Herculean efforts that people go through, and it's like if you ran a marathon tomorrow, you'd burn like 2,000 or 3,000 calories, but it'd be so hard to do and so much effort, especially if you never trained for it. But it'd be so much better if you just ran like a mile a day for every day for the next year, right?
I actually did that. I tried to run a marathon without any training. It was so stupid. I made it 17 miles. And then my like Achilles seized up and I just like waddled back to the car like a penguin. It was a really very stupid idea. So I speak here from experience and failure and trying it the other way and realizing that this is a much better approach.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like if you look at the marathon training, right? It's like that too. It's you're going, like you're doing your long runs on Sundays, maybe, and you're doing like 10 miles, and then the next week you do 8, and then the next week you do 12, and then the next week eventually you get up there to where you're doing 20 miles, and once you've like made those small, just a little bit more distance every single time, then you get to the point where you've gone from someone who could run for like half an hour to someone who runs for 4.5 hours and finishes a marathon. And it's incredible that it doesn't feel like those little improvements are going to add up like that, but they do.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it works the same way for non-fitness goals too. Like I have a friend who's a writer, and his daily habit is to write one sentence. And like, that doesn't sound impressive at all, but there are some days where he'll write like an entire page or write a full chapter or whatever. But it needs to be your habit needs to be easy on the good days so that you can still stick to it on the hard days. Like there are going to be days when you don't feel like showing up. And those are the days where it's actually more important to show up and get something in, because you're like reaffirming the identity that you're the type of person who does this, even when it's not easy or simple or whatever. And that's another reason I think to like optimize on focusing on those first 2 minutes, or just making it as easy as possible to get started, so that you can reinforce that identity of being that type of person who doesn't fall off course.
Yeah, no, that's a really good tip. That's definitely something that I try to do all the time. I call it treading water. It's like because you're not always going to be like sometimes you just got to tread, and it's like the people that are able to tread water are the ones who are able to push on it. Like you don't make the backwards progress. Like it's like
Mhm.
sometimes when I got like I'm feeling sick and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can even run today. I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna put on my shoes. I'm gonna get out there and I'm gonna run as far as I can. I'm supposed to do 10 miles today, but if I even just run one, then I've at least like it's better than I'm treading water today, right? It's like, or if I get
Yeah.
to the gym, I'm like, I'm just gonna lift and just do what I can, and at least I've done it rather than just skipping it and then you make backwards progress.
That's good. I like that. I mean, it does feel like that too, right? It just some days you just feel like you're treading water, and you're like, why am I even bothering? I'm not making any progress. But the point is, you're not losing ground, and
Yeah.
that's like really essential. And it's sometimes it's not even about the progress; it's about being that type of person and like
Mhm.
proving to yourself that that's who you are. Which is that's a yeah, I like that approach.
Yeah, yeah. There's been many times where I've told myself the reason why you're doing this is because you're a fucking bulldog and you have a YouTube channel and like people, this is who you are. Like this is why you're doing it. Like when you ask this question, but reaffirming that in myself makes me realize that.
This is
So
one of the biggest benefits of starting a business or a project like that is that you have to be that guy because you're supposed to be that guy on YouTube. You know, like you can't.
exactly.
It forces you to like act in alignment with the mindset more, which is cool.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's hilarious. When if I gain a little bit of weight, oh man, I get just flamed in the comments. They're like, "Oh, you're getting fat, John. You're getting fat." And it's like, so it keeps me. I have to stay in shape. Have to be that guy. But so I got to ask you. So, I want to figure out where does your book fit in with the two big books that I've read on habits. I think probably my go-to ones are Charles Duhigg's the Power of Habit, and then
Yep.
actually Tynan wrote this book called Superhuman by Habit. And I found those to be
Yep.
kind of the best ones that I found. So where does yours fit into that like kind of that spectrum there?
Ecosystem. Yeah, for sure. So I've read them both. So Tynan's book is very practical in the sense that it's like it's supposed to be implemented. I wouldn't call it like a list of tips, but it's more like on that side of the spectrum where there's like, here's what you're facing this situation, here's what to do.
Hmm.
Duhigg's book is more theoretical, where it's like this is what a habit is from like the neuroscience standpoint and how it works and how it forms in the brain. My book, so I would call one is the why. That would be Duhigg's book is more of a why book, like
Hmm.
why do habits work this way? And Tynan's book is more of a how book or how to book. And actually, when I pitched my book to the publisher, I said I want to write a book that is both the why and the how. So I would say it's kind of like
Okay.
in between the two. So the majority of the text is about how to implement these ideas in daily life. I am mostly interested in scientific research if it's applicable to daily life. Like it can be a good theory and that's fine, and that can still be decent science. But I'm more interested in like what can I actually use on a daily basis. And so the book is full of practical insights like that in the same kind of vein as Tynan's is focused on like how do I implement that. However, I thought Duhigg did a really good job with his book, but I also thought that there was a piece that was missing. So people who have read The Power of Habit will be familiar with his kind of like three-step model, which is cue, routine, reward,
Hmm.
for explaining how a habit works. So that model, it's been around for a while. It was originally kind of proposed by the Stanford psychologist or Harvard psychologist named B.F. Skinner in the 1930s, and it was kind of stimulus response reward. But the point is just that there's some type of cue that gets your attention. Then there's the routine that you perform, the habit you perform, and then there's a benefit or some outcome from it. However, as I looked at that model, I had a couple questions, and one of them was like, okay, well, how do you explain two people seeing the same cue and acting differently? For example, like a smoker could see a pack of cigarettes on a table and have this urge to smoke, but someone else who doesn't smoke sees a pack of cigarettes and is just like, whatever, or just like they don't feel anything. Um, and then also, how do you explain the same person seeing the same cue and responding differently in different circumstances? So, for example, the model that I laid out, also, I'll answer this last question I just proposed as I explain my model. So, It's similar to Skinner's model and Duhigg's model, but I added a fourth stage, and I did that for a very specific reason. So there's a cue. So for example, you walk into the kitchen and you see a plate of cookies. So something gets your attention. Often it's a visual cue. It doesn't have to be. It can be any of the other senses, but often it's visual. So you see the cookies. Then the second stage, and this is the one that I inserted into the process, is what I would call the craving, but it's some kind of prediction. Your brain makes a prediction or has an expectation about what to do next. So you see a plate of cookies and then you predict, oh, those will be tasty, I should go eat them. And this is where motivation happens. This stage is where every action is preceded by some type of prediction or desire or motivation that drives you to take that action.
That's a dopamine, right? The dopamine hit that you
right,
get.
Exactly. So that's when the dopamine spike occurs, is during that second stage. Then let's say you predict that the cookies will be tasty. You go ahead and pick one up and eat it. That's the habit itself or the routine. And then the final one is the reward. And the reward has two purposes. One, it satisfies the craving that arose in step 2. And you can actually, neuroscientists can actually track this. You'll be going through an experience. You'll see a cue, stage 1. A craving will happen. Dopamine will spike, stage 2. You'll take an action and eat the cookie in this example, stage 3. And then at the reward, dopamine is actually back down at the baseline because it matched your expectation. But so the reward satisfies the craving. So that's stage 4. Okay, but we could just as easily answer that question that I just proposed a few minutes ago, which is, well, what if I was in the dinner, having dinner in the other room, and I just ate 5 cookies, and then I walk into the kitchen and I see another plate of cookies there? Well, then I'm thinking, oh man, I don't want a cookie. Like, I'm full, I'm stuffed, right? So same exact cue, but a different response. And the cue routine reward model doesn't really explain why that would happen, because it just says cue, cookie, routine, you should eat it. But in fact, if we have that second stage there, you see the cue, your prediction is different. Now your state has changed. You're full instead of hungry. And because your state is different, your prediction is different. You think, okay, I don't want to eat the cookie. And then you take a different response. And then your reward is you avoid the thing that seemed painful or upsetting or unattractive to you in that second stage. So, which in this case is, I don't want to eat any more cookies because I'm already full. So that's the 4-stage model, is cue, craving, response, reward. So it's not that I thought the previous model was incorrect, but just that it was incomplete. And now I feel like it explains a broader range of behavior. And it really, a habit is just a behavior that you have repeated enough times for it to become automatic. So in a sense, any good model that explains what a habit is and how it works should also be able to explain what a behavior does before it becomes a habit, because it's just the repeating of the model. It's just cycling through that feedback loop over and over again that moves it down the spectrum from first time I did this to 100th time I did this, and now it's automatic. And so I feel like the 4 stages can not only explain a habit and how it works, but also most human behaviors. I think it'd be irresponsible for me to say it's an exhaustive framework of all human behavior, but I think it's fairly close. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a situation that doesn't fit those 4 stages.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I agree with you. I kind of felt the same thing when I was reading The Power of Habit. It's like I mean, I guess it's all models, right? It's like we're classifying something that is not necessarily so cleanly classified, but that fits in with what you're saying, and I like that idea, that adding of the context, because context is everything, and it makes a huge difference. And I mean, that's kind of like, the whole, it's kind of reminding me of the whole, what's that, willpower isn't enough, where he's talking about, environment is like that's your context right there, and that's going to change your behavior a lot based on what that environment is, or what your current internal state is.
So chapters 6 and 12 in the book discuss environment design changes and how those influence habits. And I think they're particularly crucial for stages 1 and 3. So as I laid out those 4 stages, cue, craving, response, reward, another reason that I did that is because for each stage, there's sort of like a lever that you can pull to make building good habits easier and breaking bad habits easier, or falling into a bad habit harder. So for example, for the first stage, cue, well, I call these the 4 laws of behavior change. So cue, make it obvious.
Hmm.
craving, make it attractive, response, make it easy, and then reward, make it satisfying. And so each of those four, make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying, are like little levers that you can pull. When the levers are in the right place, building good habits is easy. And when they're in the wrong place, building good habits is really hard. So one environment design change, for example, is to make it obvious. You want to practice guitar, set your guitar on a stand in the middle of your living room rather than tucked away in the closet. And then you can invert any of these laws to make bad habits more difficult. So for example, if you walk into pretty much any living room in America, where do all the couches and chairs face? They all look at the television. So it's like, what is obvious in that room? What is that room designed to get you to do? It's designed to get you to watch TV. So if you feel like I have a bad habit of watching too much TV, well, how can we make those cues less obvious in the environment? How can we make them invisible? You could take the remote and put it inside a coffee table or like underneath the lamp so you're less likely to see it, and put a book in its place. You could take the television and put it inside a wall unit so that it's like, visually closed off and you don't see it as soon as you walk in. If you have video game controllers that are like out on the floor or sitting out in the middle of the living room, you can tuck those away somewhere. If you want to get really extreme, you could take the television off the wall, put it in a closet, and then only take it out when you really wanted to watch something.
Right.
But the point is that it's like a spectrum here, but any environment is designed to nudge you in certain directions. And so what you want is for your kitchen counter at home and for your living room and for your office at work to be nudging you in a more positive direction, and making the good habits as obvious as possible and the bad habits as invisible as possible. And then suddenly it becomes a little bit easier to stick to the right choice, or to, it seems like you have more willpower, but really you're operating in an environment that is promoting certain behaviors.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, I can see kind of the depth, and it sounds like you're taking a very pragmatic approach to how to actually do this and make the changes that you want in your life. Now, what about the behavior aspect of, because you talked on that a little bit, and I've kind of always had this, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on it. I've always talked about, like, at least for me, for breaking addictions and changing behavior, that it's like, I always think of it as like a rubber band. It's like you try to stop a behavior with willpower, and it's like pulling that rubber band back. Eventually it's going to snap, and it's going to snap back the other direction hard, right? And so but changing the nature, like when you change yourself, and I think we talked about this a little bit about the identity, for me has always been something that is like, when my identity changes, then my behavior automatically changes. How does that, or what's your take on that? I'm just curious.
So I talk about this more in chapter 2. And the distinction I make is between outcome-based habits and identity-based habits. And so an outcome-based habit is what I would say is a behavior that's organized towards getting a particular result. So for example, this is usually how we try to approach something. We say, all right, I want to earn 6 figures next year. And so my plan for earning 6 figures is to follow these steps. And that's usually it. There's like the outcome, the result that you want, and then there's the plan of action for achieving it. This is very standard. You set a goal and then you try to come up with a plan for achieving that goal. But I would say that there's actually one layer deeper, which is your identity. And this is the set of beliefs and biases, the values and principles, your self-image, so to speak. And your self-image is pretty much underlying every behavior that you perform. And once you've adopted a particular self-image, then it becomes very easy to just like reinforce that by falling into the same kind of behavior patterns again. So you come up with a new plan or a new goal for what you want to achieve, but you haven't shifted the way that you look at yourself. And so you end up sabotaging that new plan or just falling back into your old patterns. To use your language, the rubber band snaps back to what your identity is. So the question that I had was, all right, if that's true, I think that it is true. There's a lot of evidence. There's also a good body of psychological research that shows that how you self-identify, in other words, what your identity is or what you believe your identity is, has a meaningful impact on your behavior. And that's usually measured with your personality traits. Like you self-identify as having a certain type of personality, and then your behaviors tend to match whatever you think your self-image is. But anyway, the question I had was, well, how can we change that? Can we design that in a meaningful way? Like, can you become someone new?
Right.
And well, you definitely can, because it's happening all the time. Like the person that I am today is very different than the person I was 10 years ago. So then the question is, all right, well, we're already shifting throughout life. Can we do it in some meaningful way? Can we like design that process? And the conclusion I came to is that identity is kind of like a feedback loop. So you come into the world and you don't have any beliefs about culture, society, or anything. You learn these over time. And the way that you learn them is through the evidence that is accumulated. So for example, if you go to church every Sunday for 20 years, you believe that you are religious. If you study biology every Tuesday night for 20 minutes, you believe that you are studious. If you go to the gym, even when it's snowing, you believe that you're dedicated to fitness. And it's kind of like each action you take casts a vote for the type of person that you believe that you are. And as the evidence accumulates and you get more and more votes, effectively, it's like that identity or that aspect of your identity wins the election in your mind. And you start to adopt this sense of self-image associated with that. And so the way I think to shift your identity is to start casting new votes. So it's by building new habits. And so it's like, for a long time, I didn't believe that I was a writer. If you would have asked any of my professors in college or teachers in high school, like none of them would have said I was a great writer. I didn't think it was a big deal it wasn't a big part of my identity. But slowly, as I wrote a new article every Monday and Thursday, and I did that for years, I started accumulating all this evidence that I'm a writer. And now, I have a book and I feel like now I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm a writer. And it's because I've accumulated that evidence. So every action you take is sort of like a vote for the type of person you want to become. And the more actions that you take in alignment with a certain identity, the more you adopt that. And the powerful thing is that identity really starts to impact that second stage, that craving stage, the predictions that you make. So for example, the same, identity can be developed in many different ways. So you can have, you can have beliefs like negative beliefs, like I'm bad with directions, or I'm terrible at math, or I'm a loser, or I'm bad at remembering people's names, or whatever. Like all of these are identities that people adopt. But then as they come across a situation, like let's say you have the identity or the belief, I'm bad at math. And then another person has the identity or the belief, I'm good at math. You can show these two people the same math problem, same cue, but then the craving, the prediction is totally different. And this happens all day long, especially with the news cycle. The same news story will run, and then a Democrat will see it one way and a Republican will see it another way. Same exact story, same exact information, but it's filtered in a totally different way based on their identity. And so it really changes the mindset that you have and the way that you interpret the cues in your life. And so if you can get an effective identity or a beneficial identity, maybe a more positive one, depending on what you're dealing with, well, then all of a sudden you see the same cue, but you see it in a totally different way. And one of my favorite examples of this is I heard the story of a guy he was in a wheelchair, and someone came up to him and asked, like, are you upset? Like, what does it feel like to be confined by your wheelchair? And he said, I'm not confined by my wheelchair. I'm liberated by it. If I didn't have my wheelchair, I'd be in a bed all day. And it's like same exact cue, totally different interpretation. So the way that you identify and the beliefs that you carry around can have a really meaningful impact on your habits and how you respond to the cues in your life.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. I was just doing a video for someone the other last night, and they're asking about how to the feeling like they couldn't get the mindset of being this like senior software developer, and they're like trying to how do I hack the mindset? I've read Tony Robbins, I've read Waking the Giant Within and all this, and I was talking about, and they're talking about imposter syndrome, and I was talking about how it's better, instead of having imposter syndrome, why don't we have delusions of grandeur? Delusions of grandeur are much better, because it's like I was like, just pretend like you're already that person, and then like if you want to be an Olympic swimmer, figure out what Michael Phelps does every day, right? And then start doing it, and then it'll take a while, but after a year or so, if you start training like Michael Phelps every day, you're going to be a badass. You're going to actually be that thing. So if you start acting as if you're already the person you want to be and taking those actions, your identity will change and conform to it. Because it's like, well, shit. I used to never run. I used to never write. Just like you were saying with the writing. But I was never a long distance runner. Then I started running every day. Running 10 miles, and then pretty soon I'm like, well, I guess I've run 15 half marathons or what. I guess I must be a runner now. And so that identity changed. But yeah, I love that approach of taking the action driving the the vote, what you called it, those actions that
I
make
think
that
that's
vote.
what you just said, I think is the right way to phrase it. The action drives the vote. And then as the votes get cast, the identity shifts. And I had a friend who she did this. She needed to lose a bunch of weight and did, and has kept it off for over a decade now. And the way that she did it was she just started asking herself, what would a healthy person do? And she
Yep.
just repeat that question every single time she was making a choice. Like, would a healthy person call a cab or walk a mile to the destination? Or would a healthy person order a salad for lunch or get a burger and fries? And she was just like doing this all day long. And then she was like, well, eventually, if I keep making the answers that a healthy person would, then I'll be that person. And she was right. And I think that this is a good way to approach pretty much any goal. And the same thing that you said about the Michael Phelps situation, which is that rather than thinking about the result that you want, I want to swim in the Olympics or have a gold medal, or I want to, lose 100 pounds or whatever, just flip the script and focus, instead of focusing on the outcome, focus on the identity. So it's like, well, who is the type of person that could swim at the Olympics? Well, clearly it's the type of person who trains every day. So then just start focusing on training every day and building that identity, and then let whatever results happen emerge naturally from there.
Yeah, yeah. It's so critical because so many people never change. I think in their life because they just want to, but they don't actually start taking it. They feel like they're not ready. I guess it's like once I feel like I'm this, then I'll start doing that. But it's I think probably the most valuable skill I ever learned in life is to do things without motivation, and that's
Mm.
that's it. And then you eventually get the motivation, hopefully. But wow, it's
I
a
had a
journey.
moment like that early on in my writing career. I was talking to a friend who's another author, and he had already written multiple books. And I told him, I essentially said what you just raised, which is that I like writing, but I only do it when I feel inspired. Like every now and then I get this kind of like burst of motivation, or an idea strikes me, and I feel like I have this creative muse. I'm like, yeah, I need to sit down and write. I was like, but I also feel like that's when I do my best work. So what do you like? What do you think of that idea? And he said, well, that makes sense. I only write when I feel motivated too, but it just happens to be every day at 8 a.m.
Yeah,
And I was like, yeah, like this is the difference between professionals and amateurs, right? Like
exactly.
amateurs do things when it's easy or when they're motivated or when they feel inspired, and professionals show up and work on a schedule. And um, adopting that mindset, you don't need to do that with everything in life,
No.
but with the things that are important to you, if they're, I'd say there are like 2 or 3 areas that you really want to make progress on. You need to act like a pro. You can't just do it when it feels easy. And in many ways, doing it when it's not easy is more important, even if it doesn't get you the results.
Exactly. Yeah. War of Art was a huge influence on my thinking a lot, just about that. And you're so right about that whole idea of like it's like sometimes when it's hard and I'm doing it, I'm thinking this is the only time that it really counts because this is when it's like you've actually melted the gold. You can actually get
Mm.
the you know what you call it, skim the gold because it takes that fire like it's like and I also remind myself of this like when it's hard this is who I really am. Like when it's easy it's not who you really are. It's when it's
Yeah.
hard this is your real personality, this is your real grit level, this is your real motivation level, this is who you are. And it's also the only time you can change that and grow it and shape it. So I'm like, okay, well, this is really hard today, but I'm growing as a person today. I'm becoming what I want to become. So yeah,
I love, I kind of feel like everything can be equated to the gym. And so
mhm,
I like thinking about like that and how it translates to these larger philosophies. But imagine if I only went to work out on days when I felt like I could hit a PR or like, put up a big lift. That would make no sense because you
right.
would never be able to lift that weight because you weren't training in the meantime. If you only went to the gym once a month or once every 3 weeks when you felt fresh, it was like, well, that kind of that defeats the purpose. Um, and so in that way, you can only have the peak moments if you're willing to show up for all the other ones in between.
Yeah, exactly. Totally agree. Totally agree. So tell me, I've been curious also just kind of your story, like what got you into this to this writing, this idea of trying to improve yourself, the productivity and all these things that you write about and becoming an entrepreneur. Was this something that like you just felt like you needed to do from the start when you started your career, or was this something that you kind of slowly moved into?
So I think some of it is like makeup, in the genetic makeup or personality or whatever you want to call it. I do feel kind of like, yeah, I like optimizing things. I like improving things. I was very interested, excuse me, in starting my own business and things like that. Um, I write about this more in the introduction to the book, my personal story, but I suffered a very serious injury. I was hit in the face with a baseball bat and had to be air carried to the hospital and was put into a coma overnight and couldn't breathe on my own. And like the fallout from that, the broken bones in my face and the recovery from the seizures and all this stuff took 8 or 9 months. It was just a very long road.
Oh, yeah.
And um, as a result of that, I didn't really have a choice. And what I mean is that I had to start small. I could only make 1% improvements or small little habits each day. Having some radical transformation just wasn't a possibility for me at that time in my life. And so, because my hand was forced to just focus on making a small improvement at physical therapy or figuring out some small way to regain control of my life, like keeping so this happened around the time that I went to college later in my high school career. So keeping my room clean, or making sure that I would study for a little bit each night, or trying to be prepared for class, or for, after about a year or so, I started playing baseball again, trying to be prepared for the baseball field and like going to practice and all these type of things. And so every change that I made was tiny, but it gave me this increased sense of control. And then eventually I could see each year how it was starting to compound a little bit. This isn't always true, but one of the things I was fortunate with in my college career was that every year I got better. And so I started kind of at this low level after this injury, but I was really able to actually see and feel what habits can compound into in my own life. And sports is great because you can actually track the numbers. So I could actually like see the numbers improve each year as well, whether it was in the gym or on the field or so on. And so after that experience, I ended up being an academic All-American my senior year and having this really great season. And after that, I had a lot of proof for it in my own life, and I was very interested in that idea. And when you combine that with my personality and like just interest in optimizing things and tweaking things, I think I was kind of primed to be interested in habits. And I didn't really have the language for it at the time. Like if you would have asked me what I was doing at the time, I never would have said, oh, I'm just trying to build better habits, or I'm trying to get 1% better every day or whatever. But looking back on it, that's exactly what was happening. And so it was only a couple of years later, after I got a graduate degree and I'd studied science and some other things and started getting interested in the research, that I started putting the two together, my personal experience and the scientific research, and then just writing about it. And for whatever reason, what I wrote on jamesclear.com and writing each week about that took off faster than anything else I did. And so I was like, oh, well, I guess people like this, so I'll keep writing about it.
Okay. Yeah. It's really interesting to see, just see the growth of your blog and your writings, and just so many people that, I talk to, and they're like, oh yeah. I read this article from James and stuff. And it's kind of interesting too. I think just like a lot of like the convergence of paths where it's like, multiple people stumble on these kind of same things and these same circles as they're going through these similar struggles, especially with entrepreneurship. I think a lot of people find the kind of truths that you talk about, but you have a way of simplifying it down and kind of enlightening the people that that don't necessarily find some of these things on their own, which I like a lot. So
I think that's really the main value that I provide. I appreciate you saying that, but just simplifying the message and trying to like distill it into something practical and easy to understand. Almost everything that I write about, people have known for quite a while, and I've read about it in multiple sources. It's not like I'm the originator of these ideas, but I kind of view it as my job to clarify them and maybe put them into a framework or a frame, lens that is a little more clear and makes it easier for people to digest and apply. And
yeah. Cool. Well, this has been awesome. I'm glad I finally got the chance to talk to you. Like I said, it's kind of cool to just to talk to someone that I've been following your stuff for a while. That's influenced me a lot. And so the book, so hopefully this interview should be coming out. So for everyone watching today on the YouTube channel, you should be able to get Atomic Habits now on the launch. Make sure that when you get this, and James hasn't coached me on anything on this. I just know because I've launched books before. Go when you buy it, go and take the time to leave a review on Amazon, because that is really important to an author. Being an author myself, I can tell you this is really, really important. Get the book. I've already got the at the time of recording this, the audio version pre-ordered. But yeah, I think you guys will like it. I think, if you like the stuff that's on my channel, stuff we talked about today, I think that, and if you haven't checked out James's stuff, go search on, go look on jamesclear.com. There's so many articles. You'll be on there for like 3 hours. So.
Oh, well, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. It's great to have your support. If people want to check the book out, atomichabits.com has more information on it too. So you can get some free downloads and bonus chapters and stuff there as well. And yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. So thank you again.
Cool. Yeah. Well, it's great to talk to you, James. And I wish you the best success with this book. And yeah, I'll definitely tell everyone I know to get it, pick it up, and hopefully you'll have a really big launch here.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Take care.